Space was quiet. Too quiet. Captain Ethan Cole stood at the observation deck of the USS Valiant, staring at the cold stars. The ship drifted in the shadow of a fractured moon, its engines barely humming. To the untrained eye, it was a single, isolated human vessel, outdated, small, no threat to anyone. But Ethan knew what was coming. The comms crackled to life. "Captain," came Lieutenant Sarah Vega's voice, calm but tight. "Long-range sensors have confirmed it. The Karath fleet just exited FTL. 73 ships, all war-class." 73. Ethan's jaw tensed. "Show me." The hollow display bloomed before him, casting pale blue light across the dark bridge. Dozens of red markers appeared, fanning out in perfect formation. Cruisers, battleships, carriers. The Karath weren't here to scare them. They were here to erase them. Sarah glanced at him from her console. "We're one ship, sir. Just one ship." Command said backup would. "They're not coming," Ethan cut her off, his voice flat. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone on the bridge knew the truth: the nearest Terran battle group was weeks away. The Valiant stood alone. The Karath were merciless. They had spent the last decade purging unfit civilizations from the spiral arm, leaving behind burned worlds and ash clouds where thriving colonies once stood. Humanity had been spared so far, thanks to careful diplomacy. But the attack on the research station at Eos Prime had changed everything. Hundreds of human scientists were killed, and the Karath claimed it was an accident. An accident that involved orbital bombardment. Ethan turned back to the display, his face lit by the eerie glow. "Helm, keep us dark." "No transponder, no broadcasts." "Yes, Captain." He let the silence sit for a moment longer. Every man and woman on that bridge was waiting for him to say what they were all thinking, that this was suicide. Instead, he smiled. "Let them laugh," he said quietly. Out in the void, the Karath flagship, Voratha's Claw, loomed like a floating predator. Its commander, Admiral Drakvar, watched the lonely human blip with what passed for amusement in his reptilian features. "One ship," he hissed. "This is the resistance your species offers?" His first officer chittered in approval. "Their transmissions indicate distress. They must think someone will save them." Drakvar let out a low, guttural laugh. "Then we will teach them despair. Bring the fleet into firing formation." Orders rippled through the Karath armada. Engines flared, shields shimmered, weapons charged. To them, this wasn't a battle, it was sport. Inside the Valiant, tension coiled like a drawn bowstring. Sarah broke the silence first. "Sir, with all due respect, 73 ships? Even with everything we've got." Ethan's eyes hardened. "I know the odds, Lieutenant. And I know what this ship can do." He walked to the central console and keyed in a series of commands. The display shifted, revealing schematics of the Valiant's interior. "This isn't just any destroyer. Project Aegis was never declassified, which means the Karath don't know what we're carrying. That's our edge." The crew exchanged glances. The rumors about Project Aegis had spread through the fleet like wildfire, whispers of experimental weapons, untested AI combat protocols, even a jump drive that could outmaneuver entire armadas. Ethan locked eyes with Sarah. "If we fall here, humanity falls with us. There's no retreat. Not today." The words hit the crew like a shockwave. No one spoke. No one objected. "Battle stations," Ethan ordered. The Valiant powered up, a lone heartbeat in the dark. On the Karath flagship, alarms chirped. "They're charging weapons," Drakvar's officer reported. "Good," the Admiral growled. "Make an example of them. No survivors." Ethan stood on the bridge, watching as the red icons closed in. His voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Target the lead cruiser." Weapons Officer Mason Briggs hesitated. "Sir, we can't." "Fire." The ship's railgun boomed, the sound reverberating through the hull like thunder. A tungsten slug screamed across space and punched through the Kareth cruiser's shields as though they were paper. The ship didn't explode, it simply ceased to exist, broken into two drifting halves. The bridge went silent. Sarah stared at the display, her mouth slightly open. Direct hit. Mason swallowed. At that range? That's impossible. Ethan's lips curled into the faintest smirk. Not for the Valiant. But the Kareth fleet was not in shock, they were enraged. Drakvar slammed his clawed fist against the armrest. Crush them! I want that human ship scattered across the void. Dozens of Kareth vessels fired simultaneously. Beams of plasma and kinetic slugs lit up the darkness, converging on the lone human vessel. Evasive maneuvers. Ethan barked. The Valiant moved like no ship its size should have been able to. It twisted, rolled, darted between bursts of fire as if it could see the future. Sarah's hands flew over her console. They can't lock on. Whatever you did to the drive, sir, it's working. Good, Ethan said grimly. Because this is just the beginning. For the next 20 minutes, the Valiant danced among giants. Every strike it made was precise, surgical, a railgun slug here, a torpedo there, each one tearing through Kareth hulls like paper. But they were still just one ship, and the fleet was closing in. Shields down to 60%. Mason called out. We can't take another salvo like that. Ethan didn't flinch. Bring the main cannon online. Sarah's head snapped up. Sir, that's... I know what it is. Do it. The lights dimmed across the ship as power was rerouted. Deep within the Valiant, the core of Project Aegis hummed to life, bathing the chamber in a blinding white glow. Drakvar's eyes narrowed as he saw the energy spike on his sensors. What are they doing? No one answered. Because no one had ever seen a human ship do this before. Ethan gripped the console, his voice a low whisper meant only for himself. For Eos Prime. The Valiant fired. A beam of pure, focused energy lanced across space, cutting through 3 Kareth cruisers in a single sweep. Their shields failed instantly, their hulls disintegrating in silence. The crew sat frozen. Even Ethan had to blink. Sarah's voice was barely audible. Sir, we just wiped out a quarter of their vanguard. Ethan stared at the fading debris field. Then we keep going. The Kareth were no longer laughing. For the first time in years, they felt something they had almost forgotten: fear. And out there in the cold void, the lone human ship kept moving, its guns still hot, daring them to come closer. The void burned with wreckage. Kareth ships spun out of control, their shattered hulls reflecting light like broken glass. Where there had once been an organized battle line, there was now only chaos. On the USS Valiant, the crew moved quickly, their adrenaline sharpening every motion. Status report, Captain Ethan Cole demanded, his voice cutting through the tense hum of the bridge. Shields at 42%, Mason Briggs said, his hands dancing over the weapons console. Power reserve stable, but if we fire the main cannon again, we'll drain the reactor to redline. Sarah Vega looked up from the tactical display. Sir, they're regrouping. The fleet's forming a pincer. They're going to box us in. Ethan's jaw tightened. The Kareth weren't fools, not for long. If they managed to close formation, the Valiant wouldn't be able to dodge every shot. Then we don't let them regroup, Ethan said. Across the battlefield, Admiral Drakvar seethed. His claws dug into the armrest of his command chair as his bridge crew chittered nervously. One ship, he hissed. One ship has done this to us? His second-in-command swallowed. Admiral, this human vessel, it's unlike anything we've encountered. It's weapons. I don't care what it is. Drakvar roared, slamming his fist against the console. Signal the carriers. Launch every fighter we have. I want that ship buried under a storm of fire. Back on the Valiant, alarms blared. Sarah's voice rose sharply. Multiple launch signatures, fighters inbound, at least 2 wings, maybe more. Mason's face went pale. We can't shoot them all down. Ethan was already moving. We won't have to. Prep the drone bay. Sarah turned to him, startled. Sir, the Aegis drones haven't been combat tested. Ethan allowed himself a thin, humorless smile. Then today's their trial by fire. Deep in the ship's lower decks, the drone bay came alive. Sleek, angular machines, more like hunting birds than spacecraft, detached from their clamps and hovered on glowing thrusters. The AI that governed them synced with the Valiant's targeting systems, their lenses glowing an eerie blue. When the launch order came, they streaked into space like arrows, vanishing into the dark. The Kareth fighters swarmed in, hundreds of them, forming a net around the lone human ship. Here they come, Mason muttered. Then the void erupted. The Aegis drones struck from every angle at once, their plasma lances punching through fighter hulls with surgical precision. Kareth pilots barely had time to react before their formations shattered. On the bridge, Sarah's eyes widened as the kill markers lit up the display. We're thinning them fast. Ethan's voice stayed calm, steady. Don't celebrate yet. This is still their turf. They outnumber us 100 to 1. Admiral Drakvar watched as his fighter wings disintegrated in less than 3 minutes. This is impossible, his first officer whispered. No ship that's small should have this kind of firepower. Drakvar bared his fangs. Then we board them. I want their technology stripped from their cold, dead hands. Prepare the Raptors. Ethan saw it coming before the sensors confirmed it. Boarding craft inbound, Sarah said, her voice tight. Ethan didn't hesitate. Seal the ship. Arm internal defenses. Minutes later, the Valiant shuddered as Kareth breaching pods slammed into its hull. The lights flickered. The crew gripped their stations. Ethan drew his sidearm, checking the charge. Mason, you have the bridge. Sarah, with me. Sir? Sarah blinked. They want our ship, Ethan said grimly. Let's make them regret coming aboard. The corridors of the Valiant became a battlefield. Kareth soldiers, towering reptilian warriors clad in black armor, stormed through the breach points, roaring war cries. But the ship's internal defenses were waiting. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, cutting swaths through the first wave. Ethan and Sarah moved with precision, firing at any Kareth that made it through. The ship's AI directed the drones not just outside, but inside. Micro-drones zipped through the corridors, targeting weak points in Kareth armor. Sarah ducked behind cover as a plasma bolt scorched the bulkhead beside her head. Captain, we can't hold them forever. Ethan's voice was steady despite the chaos. We don't need forever. Just long enough. Long enough for what? Sarah wondered, and then she realized. The Valiant was moving again, even as the battle raged inside. Sir, Mason's voice came through comms, we're threading the asteroid field. You'd better finish up down there before we start pulling GS. Understood. Ethan hurled a shock grenade down the corridor. The detonation flashed white, disorienting the last of the boarding party. With ruthless efficiency, he and Sarah cleared the hall. Pods breached, Sarah said, breathing hard. Then jettison them, Ethan ordered. The Valiant's hull compartments hissed open, ejecting the dead Kareth soldiers and their boarding craft into space. Back on the bridge, Mason grinned as he saw the ship's new position. Captain, we're in the densest part of the field. Their capital ships won't follow us in here without risking hull breaches. Ethan nodded as he strode back onto the bridge, sweat streaking his face but his eyes hard as steel. Good. Now let's turn the hunter into the hunted. Inside the asteroid field, the Valiant became a phantom. The ship wove between tumbling rocks, vanishing behind cover, striking with sudden, brutal precision. Every time a Kareth vessel tried to pursue, they lost another ship either to the Valiant's guns or to a well-placed asteroid collision. Sarah's voice was almost hushed as she watched the tactical display. We're dismantling them, piece by piece. That's the point, Ethan said. Fear is a weapon. We want them second-guessing every move they make. Admiral Drakvar's fleet was bleeding. He snarled, his tail lashing against the deck. Pull them out of the field. Regroup outside. Force the humans to come to us. But even as he gave the order, another of his cruisers exploded, torn apart by a precision strike. For the first time in his long career, Drakvar felt something alien creep into his chest. It was not anger. It was dread. On the Valiant, Ethan Cole stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching as the enemy retreated. "They're falling back," Sarah said in disbelief. Ethan nodded slowly. "They think we're letting them go. They're wrong." He turned to his crew, his voice cold, resolute. "Helm, set course. We're taking the fight to their flagship." The Kareth fleet gathered beyond the asteroid belt, battered and furious. Admiral Drakvar paced across the bridge of the Voritha's Claw, his claws clicking against the deck. The humans had humiliated him, destroyed nearly half his fleet and left him retreating like prey. "Enough of this," he growled. "Ready the supercarrier cannons. When the human ship leaves the field, we will annihilate them in a single strike." His first officer hesitated. "Admiral, such a blast risks collateral damage." Drakvar bared his teeth in a cruel smile. "Then space will have one more graveyard." Inside the USS Valiant, the crew was silent. Sarah Vega broke it first. "Captain, you're really going after the flagship? That ship alone could wipe out half our colonies." Captain Ethan Cole's eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display. The Voritha's Claw was enormous, a city-sized warship bristling with weapons. "That ship," Ethan said quietly, "was in orbit over Eos Prime the day it burned." No one argued. "Power up the main gun," Ethan ordered. As the Valiant slipped out of the asteroid field, the stars opened up around them and the Kareth fleet was waiting. "Contact!" Mason Briggs shouted. "They're charging their primary weapons." Sarah's voice was tight. "If those hit us, we're gone." Ethan didn't flinch. "Then we don't get hit." "Helm, full burn, straight at the flagship." The Valiant leapt forward, engines howling. The Kareth fleet reacted instantly. Plasma fire lit up the void, a storm of energy bolts converging on the human ship. The Valiant twisted and rolled through the firestorm, its shields flashing with every near miss. "Shields at 28%. Mason shouted. "Hold course." Ethan barked. Admiral Drakvar watched, confused. "They're coming straight at us?" "They mean to ram us," his officer spat. Drakvar's lips curled. "Then let them try." At 50,000 kilometers, the Valiant's drone bay opened. Hundreds of Aegis drones poured out like a metallic swarm, streaking toward the Kareth lines. They didn't attack the ships, not yet. Instead, they targeted the fleet's weapons arrays, sensors, and engines. On the Voritha's Claw, Drakvar's bridge lit up with alarms. "Admiral, we're losing targeting locks." "Destroy those drones," he roared, but it was already too late. The Valiant plunged through the disrupted battle line, slipping past the last Kareth cruiser and into the flagship's firing arc. "Charge at 92%, Mason called. "We need another 30 seconds to fire." "We don't have 30 seconds, Sarah shouted. "They're reorienting their cannons." Ethan's eyes were cold and sharp. "Then we make 30 seconds. Helm, bring us under their forward guns." The Valiant dove under the massive flagship, skimming so close to its armored belly that the viewports glowed with reflected light. Enemy guns fired wildly, but their size worked against them, they couldn't track the human ship this close. "Main gun at full," Mason yelled. "Fire!" Ethan commanded. The Valiant's core unleashed its fury. A beam of pure energy shot upward, piercing the flagship's shields as though they weren't there. The blast ripped through the primary reactor section, boiling half the ship from the inside. On the Voritha's Claw, chaos reigned. Drakvar was thrown from his command chair as the deck buckled. Smoke and fire filled the bridge. "Status," he snarled, struggling to his feet. "Reactor breach," his officer screamed. "Containment failing." The rest was swallowed in light. From the Valiant, the crew watched as the flagship split apart in a silent, blinding explosion. One by one, the remaining Kareth ships began to break formation. Some tried to fire on the Valiant in rage, but most turned and fled. Their fleet had no command, no cohesion, and they knew it. Sarah exhaled in disbelief. They're retreating. Mason let out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. We just killed their flagship. We actually did it. Ethan Cole didn't smile. He looked at the drifting debris field, the shattered remains of the fleet that had once been the terror of a dozen star systems. Transmit this battle record to command, he said finally. And make sure it's sent to every listening post in the sector. Sarah frowned. Sir? Let the galaxy know, Ethan said, his voice low but resolute. If they come for humanity again, this is what waits for them. Hours later, the Valiant drifted in silence, its hull scarred, its crew exhausted but alive. Sarah sat at her console, staring out into the stars. Do you think they'll come back? She asked quietly. Ethan joined her, standing with his hands clasped behind his back. Yes, he said. But not soon. Not after today. She turned to him. And when they do? Ethan's gaze was steady, unflinching. Then we'll remind them why they stopped laughing. Far away, in the hidden councils of other galactic powers, word spread quickly. The Kareth Armada gone. Their flagship destroyed. One human ship had done what entire civilizations had failed to do. And from that day forward, no one underestimated humanity again.